The massive space station New Geneva floated like a silver jewel against the darkness of space. Ships from dozens of different worlds docked at its many ports, bringing diplomats and traders from across the galaxy. The year 2387 had brought the largest gathering of alien species in known history, all coming together for the Grand Alliance Summit. Princess Zarethek stood at the observation deck of her royal ship, watching the station grow larger as they approached. Her silver-blue skin gleamed under the artificial lights, and her 4 arms moved with practiced grace as she adjusted her ceremonial armor. She was tall even by her people's standards, standing nearly 7 feet in height, with muscles that spoke of years of combat training. Her violet eyes held the cold fire of a warrior who had never known defeat. The Veltar Empire had sent their finest princess to this gathering, but Zarethek felt more like a prize being displayed than a diplomat. For months, suitors from across the galaxy had been arriving at her homeworld, each hoping to win her hand in marriage and forge an alliance with the powerful Veltar military. Each one had been challenged to ritual combat, as was the custom of her people. Each one had been defeated and sent away in shame. Her personal guard, a scarred veteran named Captain Vorthik, approached with careful steps. Even among the Veltar, few dared to interrupt the princess when she was deep in thought. "My lady, we will dock within the hour. The Emperor wishes to remind you that this summit presents many opportunities for suitable matches." Zarethek's jaw tightened. "Tell my father that I will consider any suitor who can prove themselves worthy in combat, just as I have told all the others." She turned from the window, her violet eyes flashing with annoyance. "These aliens think they can win me with pretty words and political promises. They know nothing of true strength." The docking process took another 30 minutes, during which time Zarethek prepared herself for another round of tedious diplomatic meetings. She had studied the files of the various species attending the summit. The Zephyrians were arrogant and believed themselves superior to all others. The Kethmer were traders who saw everything in terms of profit. The newer species like the humans were still trying to prove themselves worthy of galactic attention. When her ship finally connected to the station, Zarethek made her grand entrance with the full ceremony expected of Veltar royalty. Her guards marched in perfect formation, their weapons gleaming and their armor polished to mirror brightness. The other delegations watched with varying degrees of interest and wariness as the princess strode through the main corridor like a conquering general. The human delegation was among those waiting to greet the new arrivals. Ambassador Lisa Grant stood at the front of the group, a middle-aged woman with graying hair and intelligent eyes. Behind her stood several humans in military uniforms, including a man who caught Zarethek's attention for just a moment. He was tall for a human, with brown hair and steady gray eyes that seemed to take in everything around him without missing a detail. Captain Jake Miller had been assigned to provide security for the human delegation, though he wondered what good his small team could do against some of the more dangerous species attending the summit. He had served in the Terran Defense Force for 12 years and had seen his share of combat, but this was his first time working so closely with alien diplomats. He watched as the Veltar princess approached, noting the way she moved like a predator. Evaluating potential threats, the formal greetings were exchanged with the usual diplomatic politeness, but Zarethek barely paid attention to the humans. They seemed small and fragile compared to most of the other species, and their military representative looked more like a bureaucrat than a warrior. She had more pressing concerns, as Lord Kethvor of the Zephyrian Empire had already sent word that he would be arriving soon with another marriage proposal. The first day of the summit passed with the expected speeches and opening ceremonies. Zarethek endured meeting after meeting with various alien officials, all of whom seemed more interested in her father's military fleet than in anything she might have to say. She noticed that the humans were different in this regard as ambassador. Grant actually listened when she spoke about Veiltar, culture, and military traditions. It was during the evening reception that everything changed. The station's lights suddenly flickered and died, plunging the main hall into darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in moments later, bathing everything in a red glow that made the assembled aliens look even more strange and threatening. Alarms began wailing throughout the station. "This is a terrorist attack," someone shouted over the noise. "The Void Syndicate has breached the outer hull." Chaos erupted as diplomats and their guards scrambled for safety. Zarathik drew her energy blade and looked around for the source of the threat. Her warrior instincts kicked in immediately, and she began moving toward the sounds of weapon fire that echoed from the station's lower levels. The Void Syndicate was a criminal organization that operated in the empty spaces between star systems. They were known for their brutal tactics and their hatred of organized government. The fact that they had managed to attack a neutral diplomatic station was both shocking and impressive. As Zarathik made her way through the corridors, she came across a group of civilian workers who were trapped by falling debris. Several armed figures in black armor were advancing on them, their weapons ready to fire. The princess raised her blade to charge into combat when she saw the human captain appear from a side passage. Jake Miller moved with a speed and precision that surprised her. He carried only a standard pulse rifle, but he used it with deadly accuracy. 3 of the attackers went down before they even realized he was there. When more Syndicate soldiers appeared from another direction, he took cover behind an overturned table and began picking them off one by one. What impressed Zarathik most was not his fighting skill, though that was considerable for such a small being. It was the fact that he placed himself between the attackers and the civilians without hesitation. Even when the odds turned against him and more enemies appeared, he never retreated. Instead, he called out to the trapped workers, telling them how to reach safety while he held the line. By the time Zarathik reached the battle, Jake had eliminated 7 attackers, but had taken a hit to his shoulder. Blood was seeping through his uniform, but he was still firing at the remaining enemies. The princess leaped into combat beside him, her energy blade cutting through the Syndicate soldiers like they were made of paper. When the immediate threat was gone, Zarathik looked at the wounded human with new interest. He was breathing hard and clearly in pain, but his first concern was for the civilians he had saved. "Is everyone okay?" he asked, checking each person for injuries before even looking at his own wound. For the first time since arriving at the station, Princess Zarathik found herself truly intrigued by another being. This human had fought not for glory or political gain, but simply because others needed protection. It was a concept that resonated with something deep in her warriors. Heart. 3 days had passed since the Void Syndicate attack, and station security was still finding hidden explosive devices throughout New Geneva. The summit had been delayed while repair crews worked around the clock to fix the damage. For Captain Jake Miller, this meant extra shifts and constant vigilance as he coordinated security sweeps with his team. The human delegation had set up temporary quarters in Section 7 of the station, where Ambassador Lisa Grant was trying to salvage what remained of the diplomatic schedule. Jake was reviewing patrol reports when Commander Rick Stone approached with a puzzled expression on his weathered face. "Jake, you're not going to believe this," Rick said, settling into a chair across from his friend. "The Veiltar Princess has requested a meeting with our delegation. She specifically asked to observe human combat training methods." Jake looked up from his datapad, remembering the violet eyes that had studied him so intently after the attack. "Did she say why?" "Something about diplomatic research into military traditions," Rick replied with a shrug. "Ambassador Grant thinks it's a good sign. The Veiltar have never shown interest in human military capabilities before. Dr. Amy Carter, the expedition's xenobiologist, entered the room carrying a stack of cultural analysis reports. She was a young woman with curious brown eyes and an endless enthusiasm for understanding alien societies. "I've been studying Veltar. Custom since the princess made her request," she said, spreading several documents across the table. "Their entire culture revolves around concepts of strength and honor in combat. The fact that she wants to learn about our fighting methods is actually quite significant." Ambassador Grant joined them, looking tired but determined. "I've agreed to the princess's request. Captain Miller, you'll be demonstrating human martial arts and tactical procedures. Try to make a good impression." Jake felt a mix of anticipation and nervousness. He had noticed how the Veltar princess moved during the attack, flowing through combat like a deadly dance. The idea of showing his techniques to someone of her skill level was both exciting and intimidating. The demonstration was scheduled for the next morning in one of the station's training facilities. When Jake arrived, he found Princess Zarathik waiting with two of her guards. She had exchanged her formal armor for a simple training outfit that still managed to look regal on her tall frame. Her four arms moved in subtle stretching motions as she prepared for the session. "Captain Miller," she said in her accented English, "I am curious about human fighting methods. Your people are much smaller than most warrior species, yet you survived the attack with impressive results." Jake began with basic demonstrations of human martial arts, showing techniques from various Earth traditions. He explained how humans used leverage and timing to overcome larger opponents, and how their flexibility allowed for unpredictable attack patterns. Princess Zarathik watched with intense concentration, occasionally asking questions about specific movements. "Your techniques are unlike anything I have studied," she admitted, after Jake finished a complex series of grappling moves. "Most species rely on their natural advantages, but humans seem to adapt their fighting style to overcome disadvantages." "We've had to," Jake replied, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Humans aren't the biggest or strongest species, but we're good at finding creative solutions to problems." The princess stepped forward, her violet eyes gleaming with interest. "I would like to test these techniques in actual combat. Will you spar with me, Captain?" Jake felt his heart rate increase. Sparring with an alien warrior princess was not something covered in his training manuals. "Are you sure that's a good idea? I wouldn't want to accidentally injure you." Zarathik's expression shifted to something that might have been amusement. "I appreciate your concern, but I assure you that will not be a problem. My people have been training for combat since childhood." The sparring match began slowly, with both fighters testing each other's reflexes and techniques. Jake quickly realized that Princess Zarathik was incredibly fast and strong, her four arms giving her advantages he had never faced before. She could block his attacks while simultaneously launching her own, creating patterns of movement that seemed impossible to counter. But Jake had spent years fighting opponents who were bigger and stronger than himself. He used his mobility to stay out of reach of her most powerful strikes, and his unpredictable combinations kept her from establishing a rhythm. When she adapted to one tactic, he switched to another, constantly changing his approach to keep her guessing. The princess found herself working harder than she had expected. The human's techniques were crude compared to her formal training, but they were effective in ways that surprised her. He seemed to fight with his entire body, using momentum and positioning to multiply his limited strength. More importantly, he never gave up, even when she landed solid hits that should have ended the match. After several minutes of intense combat, Zarathik managed to pin Jake to the ground with three of her arms, while holding a training blade to his throat with the fourth. By all the rules of Veltar combat, the match was over. But Jake continued to struggle, trying to find a way to escape even in defeat. "Why do you not yield?" she asked, genuinely puzzled. "The fight is finished," Jake looked up at her, with determination still burning in his gray eyes. Because yielding means my people don't get protected. In a real fight, I wouldn't have the luxury of giving up. Something in his words touched something deep in the princess's warrior heart. She had defeated dozens of suitors in ritual combat, but none of them had shown this kind of stubborn courage. They fought for glory or political advantage, but this. Human fought for others. Their moment was interrupted by alarms echoing throughout the station. Commander Rick Stone's voice crackled over the communication system. All security personnel to battle stations. We have multiple ships approaching. From the Zephyrian Empire, Lord Kethvar is demanding immediate audience with Princess Zarathik. The princess released Jake and stood, her expression darkening. Kethvar, she said with obvious distaste. He is one of the suitors my father considers most suitable. He has been pursuing me for months. Through the observation windows, they could see a fleet of Zephyrian warships taking positions around the station. The ships were elegant but menacing, with flowing curves that concealed powerful weapon systems. At the center of the formation was a massive flagship that dwarfed even the largest vessels in the station's defense fleet. Ambassador Grant's voice came over the intercom. All delegation heads to the main conference room immediately. We have a diplomatic crisis developing. Jake gathered his equipment while Princess Zarathik prepared to face another unwanted suitor. As they walked toward the conference room together, she found herself thinking about the differences between the Zephyrian Lord and the human captain. Kethvar commanded through fear and intimidation, using his fleet to force compliance with his wishes. Jake had earned respect through his actions, placing himself in danger to protect others. The conference room was tense when they arrived. Lord Kethvar appeared on the main screen, his reptilian features twisted with arrogance. His scales were deep purple, and his yellow eyes held the cold calculation of a predator. Behind him, the bridge of his flagship bustled with activity as his crew prepared for possible combat. Princess Zarathik, he said without preamble, I have come to claim you as my bride. Your father has already approved the union, and my fleet is prepared to escort you home immediately. The princess stepped forward, her four hands clenched into fists. I have not agreed to this marriage, Lord Kethvar. By the laws of my people, I have the right to test any suitor in single combat. Your childish games have gone on long enough. Kethvar replied dismissively. I will not lower myself to fight a female, even a Veltar princess. My fleet is more than capable of taking you by force if necessary. The threat hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. Jake felt his hand move, instinctively toward his weapon, though he knew his small security team would be no match for a Zephyrian battle fleet. Around the room, other delegates shifted nervously as they realized how quickly the situation could escalate into open warfare. Princess Zarathik's violet eyes blazed with fury. You dare threaten me? You call yourself a warrior, but you hide behind your ships like a coward. I call myself practical, Kethvar sneered. You will come with me willingly, or I will blast this pathetic station to debris and take you from the wreckage. That was when Jake Miller made a decision that would change everything. He stepped forward to stand beside the princess, his gray eyes meeting the alien lord's yellow gaze without flinching. She said no. That should be enough for anyone who calls himself honorable. The room fell silent as every being present stared at the human captain who had just challenged one of the most powerful warlords in the galaxy. Lord Kethvar's laughter echoed through the conference room like the sound of breaking glass. His yellow eyes focused on Jake with the cold amusement of a predator toying with wounded prey. A human dares to speak to me? Your entire species is barely worth my attention, little creature. Jake held his ground despite the obvious threat in the alien's voice. Maybe so, but even little creatures can cause big problems when they're protecting something important. The Zephyrian Lord's expression shifted from amusement to anger. You think your primitive weapons can stand against my fleet? I could reduce this station to atoms before your pathetic ships could even respond. Ambassador Grant stepped forward quickly, trying to defuse the situation before it spiraled into open warfare. Lord Kethver, surely we can resolve this through diplomatic channels. The princess has clearly stated her position. The princess's position is irrelevant, Kethver replied coldly. I have already negotiated with her father. The marriage contract is signed, and I will collect what belongs to me. Princess Zarathik moved to stand directly beside Jake, her forearms crossing in a gesture of defiance. I belong to no one, least of all a coward who threatens civilians to get his way. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving the conference room in heavy silence. Through the observation windows, they could see the Zephyrian fleet beginning to move into attack positions around the station. Energy readings spiked as weapon systems powered up on the alien warship's dot station commander. Helen Davis activated the emergency protocols, sealing blast doors and routing power to defensive systems. Her voice echoed over the intercom. All personnel to emergency stations. This is not a drill. In the chaos that followed, Jake found himself assigned to coordinate the station's limited defenses with his security team. Commander Rick Stone gathered their small unit in the armory, checking weapons and reviewing evacuation procedures. The odds were overwhelming, but the humans prepared for battle with grim determination. Dr. Amy Carter approached Jake as he was, organizing defensive positions. Captain, I think you should know something about Veltar culture. The princess's reaction to your defense of her is significant beyond just gratitude. What do you mean? Jake asked, pausing in his equipment check. In Veltar society, warriors who fight beside each other form deep bonds, Amy explained. When you stood up to Kethver, you weren't just defending her right to choose. You were declaring yourself as her battle partner. Before Jake could fully process this information, Princess Zarathik appeared in the armory. She had changed back into her combat armor, and her energy blade gleamed at her side. Captain Miller, I wish to fight alongside you when Kethver attacks. Princess, you should be in the secured areas with the other diplomats, Jake replied. This isn't your fight. Her violet eyes flashed with something between anger and hurt. Not my fight? This entire situation exists because of me. Besides, I am a warrior of the Veltar Empire. I do not hide while others face danger in my name. The station shuddered as the first Zephyrian attack began. Energy blasts struck the outer hull, causing lights to flicker and emergency alarms to wail. Through the corridors, the sounds of running feet and shouted orders created a symphony of controlled chaos. Jake made a quick decision. All right, but we do this my way. Human tactics, human coordination. Can you follow orders from someone who isn't Veltar royalty? I can follow orders from a warrior I respect, she replied simply. The next few hours tested that statement to its limits. Jake's unconventional tactics confused both the Zephyrian attackers and his new alien partner. Instead of meeting the enemy head-on in traditional fashion, he used hit-and-run strikes, improvised weapons, and the station's own systems as tools of war. When Zephyrian soldiers breached the main hull, Jake led them into a maze of maintenance tunnels, where their superior numbers became a disadvantage. Princess Zarathik found herself crawling through spaces barely large enough for her tall frame, following a human who seemed to know every hidden passage in the station. This is not how Veltar warriors fight, she said during a brief rest between skirmishes. No, Jake agreed, checking his ammunition supply. But it's how humans survive against impossible odds. They emerged in the station's central power core, where a team of Zephyrian engineers was attempting to disable the defensive systems. The princess expected Jake to charge into glorious combat, but instead he handed her a set of tools and began explaining how to sabotage the enemy's own equipment. "Going to turn their weapons against them," he said, pointing to various control panels. "Can your people adapt technology on the fly?" "Veltar engineers are among the best in the galaxy," she replied with pride. "Good, because we're about to find out how good." Working together, they managed to overload several Zephyrian weapon systems, causing explosions that damaged 2 of the smaller attack ships. The remaining vessels pulled back temporarily, giving the station's defenders time to regroup and treat their wounded Dot in the medical bay. Jake watched Dr. Amy Carter tend to injured civilians while Princess Zarathik helped move patients to safety. The alien princess showed a gentle side he had not expected, speaking softly to frightened children and using her strength to lift debris that trapped the wounded. "You care about people you have never met before," she observed when they found a quiet moment together, "don't you?" Jake asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. "My people value strength and honor above all else," she replied slowly. "We protect those who cannot protect themselves, but it is seen as duty rather than ... She struggled for the right word. "Compassion?" Jake suggested. "Yes, compassion. You fight not because you must, but because you choose to care." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of an elderly Veltar in ornate robes. Elder Threnduk moved with the careful dignity of advanced age, but his eyes held the sharp intelligence of a master strategist. He bowed respectfully to the princess before speaking. "Your Highness, I bring word from your father. The Emperor is most displeased with recent developments." Princess Zarathik straightened, her royal bearing returning instantly. "What does my father say about Kethver's attack on neutral territory?" "His Majesty is concerned that your ... associations with alien species may be compromising your judgment," the elder replied carefully. "There is pressure from the High Council to accept Lord Kethver's proposal and end this embarrassment." Jake felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. The politics of the situation were far more complex than a simple matter of personal choice. The princess was not just a woman making decisions about her own life, but a political figure whose actions affected entire civilizations. "Tell my father that I will consider his wishes," Zarathik said formally. "But I will not be forced into marriage with a coward who attacks civilians." After the elder departed, the princess seemed withdrawn and distant. Jake wanted to comfort her somehow, but he was not sure what comfort he could offer. Their worlds were so different, their peoples separated by vast distances and centuries of different development. "What will you do?" he asked finally. "I do not know," she admitted. "If I refuse this marriage, it could mean war between our empires. Kethver has many allies who would support his claim. But if I accept..." She looked at Jake with eyes that held depths of sadness he had not seen before. "I would spend the rest of my life wishing I had found the courage to choose differently." The station shuddered again as Kethver's fleet resumed their attack. This time, however, the assault was more focused and systematic. The Zephyrian Lord had learned from his earlier failures and was now applying steady pressure to specific weak points in the station's defenses. Jake gathered his team for what he suspected might be their final stand. The odds had been long from the beginning, but now they faced a coordinated assault from one of the galaxy's most experienced military forces. Human determination and tactical innovation could only accomplish so much against overwhelming firepower. As they prepared their defensive positions, Princess Zarathik approached Jake one final time. "Whatever happens in the coming battle, I want you to know that fighting beside you has shown me what it means to be truly brave." "Same here," Jake replied, checking his weapon one last time. Ready to show these Zephyrians what happens when they threaten innocent people. The princess drew her energy blade, its blue glow reflecting in her violet eyes. "Ready." Together, They moved toward the sound of approaching enemy forces. Two warriors from different worlds, united by a common cause and a growing bond that neither of them fully understood yet. The emergency meeting was called at dawn station time. Ambassador Lisa Grant looked exhausted as she reviewed the diplomatic communications that had flooded their systems overnight. Word of the standoff between Princess Zarathik and Lord Kethvar had spread throughout the galaxy, drawing attention from governments and military leaders across dozens of star systems. Jake Miller stood beside Commander Rick Stone, both men showing the wear of constant combat readiness. The Zephyrian fleet still surrounded the station, creating a tense stalemate that could explode into violence at any moment. Sleep had been impossible with enemy ships so close, their weapons trained on civilian areas. "Gentlemen, we have a problem," Ambassador Grant began, her voice heavy with concern. "I've received official communications from both the Veltar Empire and the Terran Defense Command. Neither government is happy with recent developments." Dr. Amy Carter entered the conference room carrying a datapad filled with intelligence reports. "The situation is more complex than we initially realized. Kethvar has been building a coalition of species who oppose human expansion into this sector. Our defense of Princess Zarathik is being portrayed as an act of aggression." Jake felt his jaw tighten. Defending someone's right to choose their own spouse is aggression? In galactic politics, everything can be twisted to serve someone's agenda, the ambassador replied sadly. "Admiral Susan Blake is arriving within hours to take command of the situation. She's bringing a full battle group, but that might only make things worse." The mention of Admiral Blake made Jake's stomach clench with worry. She had been his mentor during his early years in the Terran Defense Force, but she was also a pragmatist who would not hesitate to sacrifice individual desires for larger political goals. If she decided that Jake's relationship with the princess was a threat to human interests, she would end it without hesitation. Princess Zarathik appeared in the doorway, flanked by Elder Threnduk and two of her guards. She had not slept either, and the strain of the situation showed in the tight lines around her violet eyes. "Captain Miller, I need to speak with you privately." They found a quiet observation lounge overlooking the docking bays, where human and alien ships sat side by side in an uneasy truce. Through the transparent aluminum windows, they could see Zephyrian patrol craft moving between the larger warships like predators circling wounded prey. "My father is coming," Zarathik said without preamble. "Emperor Zethmar himself is traveling from the Veltar homeworld with the Imperial fleet. He will arrive within 3 days." Jake absorbed this information with growing dread. An Imperial fleet meant hundreds of warships and thousands of warriors, all sworn to protect the princess and enforce her father's will. The situation was escalating beyond anything that could be resolved through simple diplomacy. "What does that mean for us?" he asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "It means that very soon I will have to choose between my heart and my duty to my people," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Kethvar has allies throughout the galaxy. If I refuse him and this leads to war, countless beings will die because of my selfish desires." Jake moved closer to her, wanting to offer comfort, but uncertain if his touch would be welcome. "Your desires aren't selfish. Every person has the right to choose their own path in life." "Do they?" she asked, turning to face him with eyes that held depths of sadness. "I am not just a person, Jake Miller. I am a symbol of my empire's strength, a tool to be used for political advantage. My personal happiness is a luxury my people cannot afford." The way she said his name, with the careful pronunciation that marked it as foreign to her tongue, made something ache in his chest. Over the past few days, they had grown closer than he had thought possible with someone from another world. Her strength and courage impressed him, but it was her moments of vulnerability that had captured his heart. "There has to be another way," he said firmly. "We've faced impossible odds before and found solutions." Before she could respond, alarms began echoing through the station. Commander Rick Stone's voice crackled over the intercom. "All personnel to battle stations. We have new arrivals jumping in from hyperspace." Through the observation windows, they watched as space itself seemed to tear open in brilliant flashes of light. Ships began emerging from the hyperspace ruptures, but these were not the sleek vessels of the Zephyrian fleet. Instead, massive, angular warships appeared, their hulls painted in the distinctive blue and silver of the Veltar Imperial Navy. "My father arrives early," Princess Zarethik observed with a mixture of relief and apprehension. The Imperial fleet was impressive, beyond anything Jake had ever seen. Dozens of capital ships arranged themselves in perfect formation, their weapons trained on the Zephyrian vessels that had dared to threaten a Veltar princess. For a moment, it seemed like the standoff might escalate into a three-way battle that would reduce the station to debris. Instead, a new voice cut through the communication channels with the authority of absolute command. Emperor Zithmar spoke in the deep, measured tones of a ruler who had never had his authority questioned. "Lord Kethver, you will withdraw your forces immediately and present yourself for judgment." "Your Majesty," Kethver's voice replied with carefully controlled anger, "I am operating under the terms of our signed agreement. Your daughter belongs to me by right of contract." "My daughter belongs to no one but herself and the Veltar Empire," the Emperor replied coldly. "However, recent events have made it clear that her judgment may be compromised by alien influences. She will return to the homeworld immediately for proper guidance." Jake felt his heart sink as he realized what was happening. The Emperor was not here to support his daughter's right to choose, but to remove her from a situation that had become politically embarrassing. Princess Zarethik would be taken home, married to a suitable Veltar noble, and this entire episode would be forgotten. "No," he said quietly, then louder as determination filled his voice. "No, that's not right." Princess Zarethik looked at him with surprise. "Jake, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that if this is about proving worth and strength, then let me prove it," he replied, his gray eyes burning with resolve. "Your people have traditions for testing suitors, right? Challenge them to accept me as a candidate." "You cannot be serious," she said, though hope flickered in her violet eyes. "The trial of 7 sons has never been completed by a non-Veltar. It is designed to test abilities that your species does not possess." "Then I'll have to find another way to pass it," Jake said with a smile that held more confidence than he felt. "Humans are good at that." The communication channel crackled to life again as Emperor Zithmar's voice filled the station. "Princess Zarethik, you will board the Imperial flagship immediately. This incident has gone on long enough." Jake made a decision that surprised even himself. He activated his own communication device and broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring that every ship in the area could hear his words. "Your Imperial Majesty, I am Captain Jake Miller of the Terran Defense Force. I formally request the right to compete for your daughter's hand in marriage through the trial of 7 sons." The silence that followed was so complete that Jake could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. He had just challenged the most powerful ruler in this sector of the galaxy, using traditions he barely understood to fight for a woman whose own people might never accept him. When Emperor Zethmar finally spoke, his voice carried a note of curiosity that had not been there before. "You are either very brave or very foolish, human. The trial of 7 sons has broken warriors far stronger than your fragile species." "Maybe," Jake replied, "but I'd rather die trying than live knowing I gave up without a fight." Princess Zarethik stared at him with an expression of wonder and terror. "Jake, you do not understand what you are asking. The trial is not just about combat. It tests every aspect of a warrior's soul. Many Veltar have died attempting it. Then I guess I'll have to be the first human to survive it, he said, taking her hand in both of his. Unless you'd rather I didn't try. Her violet eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. I would rather have you alive and far away than dead and honored. Good thing I'm planning on being alive and honored then, he replied with a smile. The Emperor's voice cut through their moment with the weight of final judgment. Very well, human. You will be transported to the Imperial flagship where the trial of 7 sons will commence immediately. Princess Zarafik will witness your attempt, as is traditional. As they prepared to leave the station, Jake caught sight of Admiral Susan Blake's battle group emerging from hyperspace. The Admiral's flagship was impressive, but it looked small and fragile compared to the massive alien vessels surrounding it. He wondered what she would think of his decision to challenge an alien emperor for the right to marry a princess from another world. Commander, Rick Stone approached as Jake gathered his personal effects. You know this is completely insane, right? Completely. Jake agreed. But sometimes insane is the only option that makes sense. The shuttle ride to the Veltar flagship gave Jake time to contemplate what he had gotten himself into. The trial of 7 sons was legendary even among alien cultures, a test so difficult that failure usually meant death. But as he looked at Princess Zarathik sitting beside him, her violet eyes filled with hope and fear, he knew he had made the right choice. Whatever happened in the coming trial, he would face it as he had faced every challenge in his life, with determination, creativity, and the stubborn human refusal to give up when something important was at stake. The Imperial flagship was a cathedral of metal and energy, its corridors stretching for miles through decks that could house entire cities. Jake Miller walked between towering Veltar guards, their armor gleaming in the artificial light, while Princess Zarathik moved beside him with the fluid grace of someone born to these halls of Power. Emperor Zethmar waited in the trial chamber, a massive space with walls that seemed to stretch into infinity. He was even more imposing in person than Jake had imagined, standing nearly 8 feet tall with silver-blue skin marked by scars that spoke of countless battles. His 4 arms moved with the controlled power of a master warrior, and his golden eyes held the wisdom and ruthlessness of absolute authority. Human, the Emperor said, his voice echoing through the chamber. You stand before the trial of 7 sons, a test that has claimed the lives of warriors far greater than yourself. Are you prepared to face challenges that will test not only your strength, but your wisdom, courage, and dedication? Jake straightened his shoulders and met the alien ruler's gaze without flinching. I am, Your Majesty. The first test came without warning. The floor beneath Jake's feet suddenly gave way, dropping him into a pit filled with razor-sharp obstacles and moving platforms. The challenge was not just to survive, but to reach the other side while mechanical defenders attacked from all angles. This was a test of reflexes and tactical thinking under pressure, where a traditional Veltar warrior might have used brute strength to smash through the obstacles. Jake relied on agility and improvisation. He used the mechanical defender's own weapons against them, turning their attacks into tools for his advancement. When one path was blocked, he found another, never following the expected route, but always moving toward his goal. Princess Zarathik watched from the observation platform, her violet eyes following his every movement. She had seen dozens of suitors attempt this first trial, and most had been eliminated within minutes. But Jake's unconventional approach was working, his human flexibility allowing him to navigate challenges designed for much larger beings. The second test transported him to a virtual battlefield where he faced an army of holographic enemies. This was a test of strategic thinking and leadership, requiring him to command phantom troops against overwhelming odds. Traditional candidates tried to win through superior tactics and conventional military doctrine. Jake threw conventional wisdom out the window. He used guerrilla tactics, false retreats, and psychological warfare to turn his enemies against each other. When direct confrontation was impossible, he found ways to avoid it entirely. When victory seemed hopeless, he redefined what victory meant until it became achievable. Emperor Zethmar watched with growing interest as the human displayed tactical innovations he had never seen before. "Interesting," he murmured to Elder Threnduk, who stood beside him recording the trial. "He does not fight as we expected." The third test was one of endurance, requiring Jake to withstand physical and mental torture that would break most beings. Electric shocks, sonic attacks, and hallucinogenic gases were all employed to test his will to continue. This was where many candidates failed, their minds cracking under the relentless assault. But Jake had been through military training designed to prepare humans for capture and interrogation. More importantly, he had something that sustained him through the worst moments. The memory of Princess Zarathix standing beside him in battle, fighting to protect innocent people simply because it was the right thing to do. The fourth and fifth tests came in rapid succession. A test of wisdom that required solving complex philosophical puzzles, which Jake approached with the practical problem-solving skills that humans had developed over millennia of survival. A test of sacrifice that demanded he choose between personal gain and the welfare of others, which was no choice at all for someone who had spent his career protecting civilians. By the time Jake reached the sixth test, word of the trial had spread throughout the fleet. Veltar warriors gathered around viewing screens to watch the small human who was somehow surviving challenges that had defeated their greatest champions. Some watched with skepticism, others with growing admiration, but all with intense curiosity. The sixth test was personal combat against a series of increasingly difficult opponents. Jake faced warriors from different species, each one larger and stronger than himself. He lost every single fight in terms of raw combat, but he never gave up, never stopped looking for ways to continue the battle. Even when victory seemed impossible. It was during the final personal combat that something unprecedented happened. Jake's opponent, a massive Veltar champion named Korthik, knocked him to the ground with a blow that should have ended the fight. Instead of staying down, Jake used the momentum to roll away and spring back to his feet, immediately resuming his defensive stance despite obvious injuries. "Why do you continue?" Korthik asked, genuinely puzzled. "You cannot defeat me in single combat." "Because this isn't about defeating you," Jake replied, blood running down his face, but his gray eyes still determined. "It's about proving that I'll never stop protecting the people I care about." The champion looked at the battered human with something approaching respect. "You fight with honor, even in defeat. That is worthy of acknowledgement." The seventh and final test was the most dangerous of all. Jake was sealed alone in a chamber with a single challenge: survive for 1 hour while the room filled with deadly radiation that would kill most beings within minutes. This was the ultimate test of a warrior's will to live, designed to separate those who truly deserved victory from those who merely desired it. As the radiation levels climbed and his body began to shut down, Jake found himself thinking not about his own survival, but about all the people who were counting on him. Princess Zarathik, who had shown him what true courage looked like. Commander Rick Stone and his security team, who had followed him into impossible battles. The civilians on the station, who deserved to live their lives free from the threat of violence. The radiation should have killed him, but human physiology proved more resilient than anyone had expected. More importantly, his will to protect others gave him strength that pure physical endurance could not provide. When the chamber doors finally opened, after the longest hour of his life, Jake Miller was still alive, still conscious, and still ready. To fight if necessary. Emperor Zethmar stood waiting for him, flanked by his daughter and the entire High Council of the Veltar Empire. The alien ruler's golden eyes held something that had not been there before: genuine respect for the small human who had achieved the impossible. "You have completed the trial of 7 suns," the Emperor announced, his voice carrying throughout the ship. "But not in the way we expected. You did not win through superior strength or traditional tactics. Instead, you demonstrated something far more valuable: the absolute refusal to abandon those who depend on you." Princess Zarathik stepped forward, her violet eyes shining with tears of joy and relief. "You did it," she whispered, taking his battered hands in her 4 strong ones. "You actually did it." But their celebration was interrupted by new alarms echoing through the ship. High Inquisitor Vexilon, a zealous Veltar traditionalist, had arrived with a faction of the Imperial fleet that opposed any alliance with alien species. His ships moved into attack formation, their weapons trained on the Emperor's flagship. This human contamination must end. Vexilon's voice crackled over the communication channels. The princess has been corrupted by inferior alien influences, and the Emperor has lost his way. I claim leadership of the Empire by right of strength. The civil war that followed was brief but intense. Vexilon's forces attacked both the Imperial ships and the nearby human fleet that had arrived with Admiral Susan Blake. It was Lord Kethvar who made the difference, his Zephyrian vessels joining the battle on the side of the legitimate government. "I may disagree with the princess's choice," Kethvar announced over open channels, "but I will not support a treasonous coup against the rightful emperor." Jake and Princess Zarathik fought side by side once again, this time leading a boarding party against Vexilon's flagship. Their partnership had evolved during the trial, becoming something that transcended the differences between their species. They moved as one warrior with 2 bodies, each covering the other's weaknesses while amplifying their strengths. When Vexilon finally fell in single combat against the princess, his rebellion collapsed immediately. The surviving rebels surrendered, and the various fleets began standing down from battle readiness. The crisis was over, but its resolution had created something entirely new in galactic politics. Emperor Zethmar made his announcement from the Yatfiing bridge of his flagship, with representatives from dozens of species listening over subspace communication. "Today we have witnessed something unprecedented. A human warrior has proven himself worthy of joining the Veltar royal family, not through conquest or political maneuvering, but through genuine courage and dedication to protecting others." The wedding took place a month later aboard New Geneva Station, now rebuilt and expanded to accommodate the massive gathering of beings from across the galaxy. Jake Miller stood beside Princess Zarathik in a ceremony that blended human and Veltar traditions, their union representing a new kind of alliance based on shared values rather than political necessity. Admiral Susan Blake attended the ceremony in full dress uniform, her stern face showing approval despite her initial concerns about the diplomatic implications. "You've changed the game, Captain," she told Jake during the reception. "Governments across the galaxy are taking notice of what humans can accomplish when we're fighting for something we believe in." The formation of the Warriors' Accord followed naturally from the wedding alliance. Species that had never worked together began training jointly, sharing tactical knowledge and technological innovations. Jake found himself promoted to general and given command of the first integrated human-alien military unit in history. Standing on the bridge of their new flagship, watching human and Veltar crews working side by side, Jake reflected on how much had changed since that first terrorist attack on the station. Princess Zarathik, now his wife, approached with a smile that could light up the darkness between stars. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, slipping her hand into his. "Just wondering what impossible challenge we'll face next," he replied, pulling her close. "Whatever it is, We'll handle it together." The stars stretched endlessly before them, full of unknown dangers and unlimited possibilities. But Jake Miller and Princess Zarethic faced the future without fear, knowing that the strength they had found in each other was greater than any obstacle the galaxy could throw at them. Their love had not only united two hearts, but had forged a new path forward for all the species brave enough to follow their example.